So basically, these are some of the bills that they are looking out to try and dispense with, maybe before the resumption of regular sittings. A look at the County Oversight and Accountability Bill is that the principal object of the bill is to provide a framework for effective oversight over the county government by the Senate. The Senate was tasked with oversight over national revenue allocated to the county governments under the constitutional concept of devolution and the principles of public finance. The input of the public is required in all executive decision-making processes. This bill therefore proposes to provide a mechanism on how oversight over the county budgets can be carried out. The bill gives effect to the constitutional provisions on oversight, public participation, and participatory democracy. The bill also provides or rather on clause 20 of this particular bill is that it empowers the county executive committee member to make regulations for the better carrying into effect of the provisions of the legislative proposals. But the bill does not limit fundamental rights and freedoms. So this is basically what this particular bill entails. It is a bill that has been tabled by Senator Ledama Olekina and will be going into the Committee of the Whole for consideration this morning. Deputy Speaker of the Senate has stepped into the chambers, Honorable Margaret Kamar. I will now hand you over for the live broadcast. Good morning. My name is Kamche Menza.
Prayer. Almighty God, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor and blessings as your servants whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our judge. Amen.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Next.
3 messages.
Next order.
Order number 4, petitions.
Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Senator Mwinyi Haji Mohamed Faki, you have an intervention.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can see that this is a special session, and we have a lot of business. I think I can see about 5 or 7 bills which are lined up for division. And at the moment in the chamber, we have 5 members who I don't think form a quorum to transact the business that is ahead of us. So, Madam Speaker, I'll kindly ask that you maybe ring the bell so that members can come in, or in the event they don't, or maybe we'll be informed whether there are members online which can constitute a quorum for transacting this business. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Haniri, George.
Madam Speaker, maybe on the same breath, I'm looking at the provisions of Standing Order number 30, which provides for this kind of sitting, special sitting. And in particular, I'm looking at Standing Order number 30, paragraph 5, which clearly states that whenever the Senate meets for a special sitting, under paragraph 1, the Speaker shall specify the business to be transacted on the day or days appointed, and the business so specified shall be the only business before the Senate during the special sitting, following which the Senate shall stand adjourned until the day appointed in the Senate calendar. Madam Speaker, we saw the Gazette notice, and the business was clearly specified. I didn't see any statements in the business that was specified. I didn't see any notices of motions. Mr. Speaker, this business was very clear what we were coming to transact within the 3 days of sitting. So I just wanted to get your clearance. I see the clerk on the desk asking for statements, if there are any statements. Was that part of the business that we were supposed to transact today? And maybe going forward, do we still have to read through these motions of papers, business statements, whenever we have a special sitting and the business that you're supposed to transact is specified? Do we still have to go through those motions? I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senators. Let me start with the second member's concern, Senator Aniri. You rightfully stated that on a special sitting, we specify what we are supposed to come and do. Actually, if you listened as he was mentioning, I kept saying next order, because these orders are just procedural. It's a procedural way of having our order paper. Otherwise, we don't touch anything number 1 to number 7 when you're on special. So you are very correct that that those ones don't actually appear. Whether they are on the paper or not, we don't deal with anything except what was specified. So what was specified as raised by Senator Mwinyi is the order number 8, 9, 10, and 11. And he has requested that we ascertain whether we have quorum. And I want the clerks to ascertain that, because in a mixed system, we have people online and we have some in. So clerk, can you ascertain if we have enough members online and in the House? Honorable Senators, this has been done. We have 5 in the chamber and we have 4 online. So we'll ring the bell for 5 minutes.
Well, Deputy Speaker of the Senate has Honorable Margaret Kamar has just ordered that the bell be rung for 5 minutes. This is due to lack of quorum to undertake these special sittings activities. Remember, this is a special sitting and there are specified business for this particular sitting. And the specified business in this special sitting this morning is that members will be proceeding on a committee of the whole to consider a number of bills in the division stage, and they will be needing quorum to actually undertake that particular task in the division stage. This is an issue that has been raised by Mombasa County Senator Mwinyi Haji, who actually indicated that there is no quorum, and the business before the floor of the House is that there are about 4 bills that will require the members to go on division. But if there is no quorum, then that might actually hinder them from undertaking that particular business. So remember, this is a special sitting that has been, this is the 3rd day. Senators are supposed to resume their regular sittings on the 8th of February. But from the 25th, the 26th, and today being the 27th, the senators have been on special sittings where they've been considering a number of bills, actually targeting to dispense with those particular bills, with the Political Parties Amendment Bill 2021 being dispensed with on the floor of the House of the Senate last evening, when the members passed that particular bill without amendments. So there are a number of bills this morning that will be considered in the committee of the whole, but there is no quorum. According to standing orders, 15 members are needed to be present, whether virtually or in the chamber, physically present in the chamber, when the Deputy Speaker was ordering for the bell to be rung for 5 minutes to enable members to maybe flock into the chamber or log in from wherever they are. There were 5 members in the chamber, while 4 were online, actually attending this particular special sitting virtually. So those are 9 members, falling short of about 7 members or 6 members to enable the House achieve its quorum or the requisite quorum for the business of the day to take place. 4 bills will be considered in the committee of the whole this morning and will require members to go into division to see whether they will be accepting the recommended amendments or they will not. One of the bill is the Heritage and Museum Bill, Senate Bill number 22 over 2021 by Honorable Senator Alice Milgo. This will be a resumption of a debate that was interrupted on Tuesday, 25th January 2022. The bell is ringing for 5 minutes to enable members either flock into the chambers or log into and attend this particular sitting virtually, just to enable the House achieve the requisite numbers of about 15 members to enable them undertake the specified business.
Honorable Senators, after the quorum bell, it is very clear again that we only have 6 members in the chamber and we have 5 members online. So, Honorable Senators, there being no quorum, the Senate stands adjourned until today, Thursday, 27th February 2022 at 2:30 p.m.
Growing old is a process rather than an outcome, a universally recognized inevitable phase of an individual's life. In Kenya, there were about 270,000 old persons in 1949. In 2009, the number had increased to 2.6 million. And if this trend continues, there will be over 2.9 million elderly people above 65 years by 2020. Older people play a vital role in traditional African society. They are revered and usually cared for by their adult children and sometimes by close relatives. Across Kenya, many families depend on the contribution of older persons on cultural wisdom and guidance, caring for the younger children and especially orphans. Sometimes they are even looked upon to provide the much-needed income. But although older persons are essential to their communities, they face a great risk of marginalization, poverty, and social insecurity due to internal and external factors. To avoid the indignities experienced by older persons, there is need for adequate preparation towards growing old in dignity. Kenya has over the years made progressive investments in social protection for the aging, as enshrined in the Constitution of Kenya Bill of Rights and envisioned in Vision 2030 Social Pillar. Cash transfer is one of the social assistance instruments in the wider social protection being used to address the needs of the vulnerable older persons. The Older Persons Cash Transfer, also referred to as OPCT program, started on a pilot basis in 3 districts of Thika, Nyando and Busia in 2007 with an allocation of 2.4 million shillings and targeted 300 households with each receiving 1,000 shillings a month. This was scaled up in 2010 when the government allocated 530 million shillings, covering 44 districts with 33,000 households receiving 1,500 shillings a month. In 2012, the program was allocated 1 billion shillings, which benefited 36,000 households, each receiving a monthly transfer of 2,000 shillings. In 2013, 59,000 households in all the sub-counties were targeted, receiving an allocation of 1.5 billion shillings. In 2014, the program was allocated 2.6 billion shillings, which upscaled to 164,000 beneficiaries in all the 290 constituencies in the 47 counties. Currently, each beneficiary receives a monthly stipend of 2,000 shillings paid through a payment service provider. In 2014, the cash transfer program was relaunched by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, leading to an expanded enrollment of 105,000 more beneficiaries.
We take this step in the full knowledge that every Kenyan deserves a decent life despite the circumstances of birth or life.
During the celebrations to mark this year's United Nations International Day of Older Persons, held on 1st October every year, the Cabinet Secretary re-emphasized the objective of this cash transfer. The theme of the day was Leaving No One Behind, emphasizing the purpose to take stock of the positive gains and strides realized for our senior citizens and celebrate their contribution in the society.
I am happy to mention that the Kenya government appreciates the important role being played by the older persons in national development. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 Article 57 within the Bill of Rights has specific provisions geared towards the promotion and protection of the rights of older persons.
And in an effort to show the impact of this cash transfer, the Ministry of Labour, Social Security and Social Services, together with the Department of Film Services, Ministry of Sports, Culture and the Arts, embarked on a filming exercise countrywide, capturing views, lessons and experiences from the beneficiaries and program implementers on how the money has been used. And the beneficiaries had success stories to tell.
Ye joketie gado nene muno maturubare nyobi sirigi girisi idano lwa kone adi marakari oyori ndiamwe magana masio mugwaja ona yari litoko kimanegere sai tondu mari ona kwao yeni
ndithetie na riri ngakihura kaguku ngone tatogana ndina mwana kia nani mwana ke mwene uyu horo wana kia aria meri ekwende gwakirwo ni mami wao ngo ni horo wa ndawa nyugaga ndawa igeragwo thika na no mbeca cio irutaga wira ucio.
Fui mradi imensaidia godoro na blanketi nimenunua 3 yangu 2 na mzee wangu na mtoto mmoja. Kwa hivyo nimeshukuru sana.
Pesa cia kwa ici cia thirikari kuma ndacinyita mbere ndagũrire ng'ombe ĩrĩa wona 10,000 ici ng'ombe tũrĩa ndagĩtigĩirwo to ndĩ umbe na ngũre kanyamũ karĩa ngwenda niĩ nĩndeithĩkaga mũno kuma ciambĩrĩria gũka tondũ ndĩonaga thĩna wa ng'aragu ndĩonaga thĩna wa kĩndũ ngwenda.
Na rĩu ndĩ na mũhei ciana ciakwa nĩ ciakuire na mũthee nĩ akuire twathire tũkĩheo ciringi 8,000 ngĩũka nacio ngiuga mbeca ici ciakwa tondũ rĩu ndĩrĩa ndĩraga nĩ mabati no mũhaka ngũre mabati nĩgetha nyũmba ĩno yakwa ĩtige kũnjurĩra ngĩkĩgũra gakuo tũrĩ o gũkũ tũkuo tũu ũguo rĩu ndiuragĩrwo mbũri ĩrĩa ndagĩũka nĩguo ndarũmbũirie kũgĩa mbũri ngĩgĩa ngũkũ.
Nintethagĩria wana nkarwara ichimbira cibitari ngũrĩrĩte mũrengeti itangũrĩa gĩtanda bai ndarĩ nakĩo chagũrire nyamũra mabati chandũthĩrata changũrĩra mbũri ino irĩ gũkũ ikangũrĩra nguo na ikangũrĩra bia kũrĩa nontu ntirĩmaga ngachukuma maisha nakwa.
I'm his caretaker. I'm the one who went for his money so that I can take care for him. Buying them food. I also bought a goat so that I can be milk for them. I bought 2 blankets, a mattress, and also clothes for changing. I started buying iron sheets. I've started building that, the house that you see there.
Butuh gabela kita ni, kalau kita hari itu elipetisa, ni anak sek. Nanti aku bilang asiling ke elipukumi nak cana. Tapi bilang gitu kan, masih nang ada bilang tu bilang. Atau balang mati ni kita kena ada, ni kita mahu mengamani. Rasa mani angah bangau kita ada. Ini anak kita nggak ada.
Samayo ngapesi anyemi epewa agwel na tapa na anyemi ngo kedia agwel do ngakine ka bongo agwela kan ketenge Akoki kana. Abeto golo adu kuja bo mabati 12. Ala karongo.
Said.
Tinonga twane tengere. Ala kario. We muega we. Twambara yere monde narucio. Ginyate. Nana vewa tubesa tu. Ngisiria ngingire tudiga. Buke mbigeava. Yuga kan ndume kanyomba gatorumu todhato. Bikarage kuo. Narungwesa ngosha ka firati. Ndo ndio uchana ndio na vanini. Ngora mirenge tieno. Ere Luga ni kunikagire nyo. Ndio uchana ndio na vanini. Ne karaga gaka. Kakire kamono ni muthua. Mono. Kanyomba kaka kwa wananginya mvundi ucio ndumirite andu maukagala. Nundu wakona tikaga tumewega. Ndokona ria mwambithira nio atio nio ni etangu yakwa ya niyo muno. Ana nagurire ingi mikunjo. Marethi gokugo. Muthenya ucio na igwatire. Neno kirio na mamanyata. Na ukiro guo ngithia tauni. Ngithiriria nguo cimaki ngimiringa ngiricio. Luga ni rumeo nundu. Yo ngoro wakwa atenefeka ati.
Mbeca icio na ukirengethera kanyomba gakwa tondu twauragirwo muno ni mbura mabati mara maikuongirita mothe ngikira menge ma macero nkwa ngendeka mundu wa gwikate kwa kunyimbira nyomba na rika kunyimbira nyomba tubia turana twatigarite ngicwa ngimuva indethetie muno kigora kaburi gaka ni ithatu ng'ombe ni amwana kwa cokire kugura gukakirete gutu murithagiria tunyunyaga karia kirithagia no mbugire ndiganirie eria ya mwanake nkureka kwana ni mbige vuka twagare wala ni ngunda ke koka kiuma thumu ya gwikira mugunda ri ini
hiyo pesa tunafanyia kazi tunamlishia kuku na mwandika masiwa ya na hiyo ndio tunapenda sana masiwa tuka viazi hii na hii viazi tamu anapendanga hizo na tukaletewa kadi nyingine kama hii kama ATM hiyo ndio tunashikia
ndiye muteithe kurio tondo ndirararira na kindu kini kindeithĩtie ndaringania na kabiacara kanduta gaba kathondeka kagombe kehara kanini na nyumba na wera ndiraremerirwo ndirambe akarangi ucio na mutune uguo niguo njikite na thirikari nĩ ndeithĩtie maundu manene muno ndamona
As a way forward, the program plans to fast-track capacity building that economically empowers the beneficiaries. Through the expansion plan, the ministry hopes to have covered all deserving older persons by the year 2017. Institutionally, the government plans to consolidate all the cash transfers into one implementation entity premises.
Gira Ngai mina shukuru sana Mungu. Nirauga ni wega.
Ndikwerekereria kwa ngwerekereria niki. Ngati Ngai ndendete nore. Ndendete mbikari oguo tu. Ndagewira mbikari oguo. Nena kamwiri kau.
Ninashukuru sana kwa sababu ya serikali hii. Kwa sababu imetusaidia. Ukweli hata ukiangalia mzee unaona ni smart na ni hizo pesa serikali zimemsaidia.
Ndani wewe umwe ni wewe hale. Nabonanga sauti ile.
All this is aimed at Inua Jamii.
Small and medium-sized enterprises are the heartbeats of the Kenyan economy. They contribute about 34% to the country's annual wealth, and they employ almost 80% of the country's total workforce. But this critical industry is at a crossroad.
These MSMEs are not even creditworthy in the eyes of the financial institutions. So you find when you're dead completely. And that's why the fund then would have been very handy to be able to cushion these institutions, these businesses, so that they are able to stay afloat.
This week on Inside Government, we talk to the chairperson of Micro and Small Enterprises Authority, James Moreu, on what the fund is doing to jumpstart this critical industry, right here on KBC Channel 1.
Hii ni maji, amekufa, ameondoka. Hebu angalia utamu wa Uislamu hapo peke yake. Utakuta sisi tunaenda, hata tuongoje mtu ako mbali, popote amekufia tutazikia hapo. Wakati yoyote atakufa, hatutamchelewesha, tunahakikisha tu roho kweli imeshatoka, hiyo mili tena haifai kuishi juu ya hii ardhi, bali inafaa kuenda kusitiriwa.
Ikiwa tunampenda Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basi tumfuate mtume wake ambaye ni Mtume Muhammad sallallahu alaihi.
As we on your health, we take you to Nambale and share with you a journey that has seen hundreds of lives of children in the area saved courtesy of the 4-dose jab.
Malaria has been a great burden in this part of the country, and it's one of the diseases that has led to deaths of under 5s, mostly pregnant women, because they are the group that is mostly affected by the seriousness of the disease.
Huyu mtoto vile nilimzaa ako tofauti na wale watoto wenye nimezaanga nyuma. Tofauti yenye iko, huyu mtoto amepata hizo chanjo, imemsaidia sababu malaria sio sana apate.
Mount Kilimanjaro, an icon of Africa, and for centuries a mystic destination for adventurers and explorers. In this series, CCTV Africa will attempt to take you to the top of this beautiful and dangerous mountain and look at what makes it such a draw to so many people around the world each year. Kilimanjaro is many things to many people. It's a fragile ecosystem, and it's also a place of work for the thousands of people who live on its slopes. It's a journey of stamina fraught with hazards and extreme conditions at every turn.
Good job.
Somewhere out there's Mount Kilimanjaro waiting for us to get on it. We can't see anything right now. It's cold, it's wet, it's windy. Running through a lot of trees, can't see Mount Kilimanjaro right now. This is pretty intimidating. It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge, and that's usually the best part. Mount Kilimanjaro is the tallest mountain on the African continent and the world's tallest freestanding mountain. Sometimes called the Roof of Africa, it's a huge, dormant volcano rising nearly 6 kilometers above sea level. During our climb, our guide will lead us through 5 climatic zones. We'll pass from lush mountain forests into scenic moorland. We'll then move into the stark alpine desert zone. From there, we'll climb up into the Arctic region, where we will get the chance to see Kilimanjaro's famous vanishing glaciers. Our climb will culminate in a difficult last push up to Uhuru Peak at the summit. It's a long and challenging journey, passing through some unique environments with a chance to see some of Africa's most awe-inspiring scenery. However, many people who attempt this climb don't actually make it to the top. Tragically, some even die each year in the attempt. One of the things we're going to be looking at on our journey is just how much the mountain and the process of climbing it has changed over time. To find out, I paid a visit to the home of the Kilimanjaro Mountain Club at the Marangu Hotel. Seamus Bryce Bennett is the current owner of the hotel and custodian of the Mountain Club's records.
On the afternoon of Thursday, July the 26th, 1928...
When explorers in the 1840s first described seeing a snow-capped mountain on the equator, people did not believe them. Many attempts were made to be the first to reach the top, but it was a long time later, in 1889, before the mountain was finally conquered by a team led by German geographer Hans Meyer.
So, Rama, we've got some interesting photos in here. This is a collection of photos. It shows how the ice has changed on Kibo over a period of over a century, yeah.
Because that's the first is 1920.
Yeah, this is 1920, and just look at it. There's an ice cap all the way around. This here is 2005, and you know, it's really a fraction of what it was up there.
I've never done this before. What would you tell someone like me to watch out for? What are the do's and don'ts when climbing out on Mount Kilimanjaro?
Ultimately, it comes down to 4 cardinal rules if you want to have a successful climb of the mountain. Number 1, the most important, go slowly. Pole pole, all right? Because altitude...
You're telling that to a Kenyan. We're not really used to going slowly.
You have to. Altitude is no respecter of youth, strength, fitness, or Kenyans, all right?
Duly noted.
Right. Number 2, you've got to drink like it's going out of fashion. You just have to really pour the fluids into you. And thirdly, when you're up high, you've really got to watch the sun. You know, it is just hugely dangerous. The ultraviolet burns people to a crisp. And finally, I always say to people, look, we can never guarantee you're going to get at the top of the mountain. Sometimes altitude is kind and sometimes it's not. So ultimately, you've got to remember it's a beautiful, unique mountain. And wherever you get to on it, you just have to enjoy yourself.
And you have to respect the mountain.
Oh, of course, you respect it. But ultimately, enjoy it.
But on the way to begin our climb, things weren't exactly off to an enjoyable start. Right, so we haven't even gotten to our first starting point for the trek yet, but this should give you an idea of the sort of challenges we have to deal with. The roads up here are so bad, the bus carrying our luggage is actually now having a problem getting through the mud. Where we're standing now, this isn't particularly bad, but as you go up the road, it gets a lot worse. You've got ditches on either side of the road and some really, really soft mud, very sticky, very nasty to drive through. So up here it gets a lot worse. Deep ruts on either side of the road, very, very narrow, and that isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Right then, the mountain's first challenge, having the bus stuck somewhere down the road, has finally been overcome. Our gears all here, doing final checks, everything seems to be in order. But night is going to fall fairly soon. Temperatures will drop, the rain might actually come. The weather around here snaps very quickly, so torches, very handy. Rain gear, in my case a poncho, also very handy. It's one thing to talk about climbing the mountain, it's another thing to actually do it. This is a part where actually the rubber meets the road, so let's go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, shall we? After much preparation, we are finally on the trail that will hopefully take us to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. The first day and a half of our journey will be through this lush, thick mountain forest. It may be one of the wettest parts of the mountain, but it contains an amazing variety of unique plants and animals. It's an otherworldly environment, filled with ferns and mosses and enormous trees draped in bearded lichens. In the 19th century, Kilimanjaro was a key destination for botanists and plant collectors from all over the world. Several species, such as the impatiens kilimanjari, cannot be found anywhere else on Earth. Leading our climb will be our guide, Simon Mtui. Born on the mountain slopes, he's right at home here, and he knows almost every inch of this mountain. He also happens to be a former world record holder for the fastest unsupported ascent of Kilimanjaro.
This mountain means so much to me. It's a mountain that I've seen it, I've playing around it, I've climbed it, I've seen people from all different backgrounds come and climb the mountain. So I'm just sort of very inspired to be one of the child to be playing around as my playground. The question will come quite often, do I feel tired of seeing the same things? Obviously, that's not the case. This is the mountain every time you can see in a different face. And every time I will have a different story to tell.
As the day draws to an end, the team are still on the trail. The density of the forest and the humidity have a sapping effect on energy and morale. I, for one, am getting tired, and our camp is still a way ahead. This is day one. We finished a 2-ish hour trek from where we started through some beautiful, absolutely beautiful forest. Steep hills though, my ankles are practically numb. Just, nibble on them. But by morning that should all be gone. In terms of expectations versus what actually I experienced, this is interesting. This is totally new for me. I've never gone camping before, never done any extended trail hiking on this scale before, and it's been fun. It's more of a mental thing than an actual physical problem. If you put your mind to it and you can actually execute it and you believe you can and you push yourself towards that, anything is possible. Early morning in the forests of Kilimanjaro is a magical time. As the sunlight clears the mists away, our journey up Africa's highest mountain continues. First night ever for me under canvas was pretty interesting. I mean, you look at these tiny little tents and you don't think a lot can be done with them, but they're actually quite comfy once you sort it out. Blanket, thermal blanket to that, decent mattress, nice cozy little sleeping bag, job done. You'll be out before you know it. Today's climb will be a very intense one. As a crow flies, you're going to cover about 8 to 10 kilometers, which isn't a lot, if the ground is flat. The problem is today, we're going to be gaining about 700 meters in altitude in one day. Normally, it's recommended that you do not do more than 300. And we're going to try and push ourselves to actually double that and exceed it quite a bit. I do hope my legs are up for it, but we'll see. As we leave the forest behind, we emerge to some spectacular views of the surrounding landscape and a sudden change in weather.
It's absolutely bucketing down. But the good news is, despite being wet and all the challenges that poses for shooting in this absolutely torrential rain, we have more or less cleared the forest. Now we're entering the moorland, stage 2 as far as vegetation is concerned on the mountain. But this isn't time to celebrate. The Shira Plateau is still ahead of us. We've still got a lot of ground to cover. Roughly 500 meters of elevation from where we are. And after that, and only when that's covered, can we finally get to our camp for the night.
Camp is the only shelter for miles around, so we must push on. The landscape is bleak and the going extremely tough.
My legs are gone. Generally that's it, exhausted. And we still have a lot more to go.
Eventually, we crest the Shira Ridge and are rewarded with our first views of the Shira Plateau and hiding in the cloud, the snow-capped peak of the mountain. Our camp is also in view, and a final effort gets us to shelter and rest. For the next 2 days, we relentlessly continue our trek across Kilimanjaro's stark heath and moorland. We travel through good weather and bad, with the mountaintop continuously playing hide and seek with the group. The Shira Plateau is actually the collapsed crater of the oldest of the 3 volcanic vents that together make up Mount Kilimanjaro. While the highest, and our current objective, Kibo, is dormant, Mawenzi and Shira are no longer active.
We've been walking through a boulder field for hours now, and it's full of these massive rocks scattered all over the landscape, as you can see here, and they're pretty big. I mean, the sheer size of these things is amazing. 30, 40, probably 80 kilos in weight. And just imagine, we're about 10, 15 kilometers maybe from the peak of Kibo, and the force required to move something this big, or 80 kilos of this, from all the way up there to down here is enormous. But here's what's really mind-blowing. Imagine how much force is needed to move that.
It's in environments like this that you start to understand how the many myths and legends of the mountain have come about. The Chaga people long believed that there were magical genies and spirits living on the mountain, and there are many tales of treasure troves hidden in Kilimanjaro's unexplored caves and valleys.
I know firsthand just how hard it is to get up here, and we're not even halfway up the mountain yet.
Today, though, I'm going to meet two gentlemen who between them have a century's worth of experience. One of them, in fact, was trained by the first guide to ever make it to the summit of Kibo.
The former head of the Tanzanian military, retired General Mrisho Serekeke, and the legendary expedition guide Emmanuel Minja meet me to tell me about their many years on the mountain.
You've been climbing this mountain several times for nearly 40 years. How has the mountain changed in that time?
When I started going up, first time, 1965, the traffic was practically zero. Very few people used to go up this mountain. Climate change has made a lot of difference on the mountain. The snow, what I saw in 1955 and what we see now, there's a hell of a difference. There's plenty of snow. Sometimes it used to come up to 14,000 feet. But today, most times, the snow is limited to actual top. The vegetation has changed as human traffic increased. There were a lot of fires. So you find once the vegetation is burned out, it takes years to grow back. So there are a lot of changes from what we saw at the beginning and now.
Tulikuwa na zamani hii tulikuwa ya watalii. Tulikuwa tunajifunika na blanketi.
Blanketi tu?
Shati, blanketi. Kijana huwezi kusikia baridi.
You used to bring soldiers up here, General?
Every year I used to come up with some senior military officers. One group of senior officers whom I considered they were being a bit too comfortable by growing tummies. And the other group was the people that reading their reports. Their reports were excellent. And these were people that you could entrust them with command. But I didn't know them personally. What I used to do, at 18,000 feet on the scree from Marangu side, I was always Emmanuel first and then me. And then officer whom I wanted to interview on the mountain is number 3. And I said, so-and-so, said, yes, sir. There's somebody at the rear, go down and help him up. And then I used to observe the reaction. And this was very important for me to know exactly when this is a commander, this fellow is a commander of a unit, and then it comes to a crucial, difficult situation. How does he handle his men? For those who were building up tummies, I didn't have any interview with them because the mountain interviewed them.
Takes care of the topic.
Yeah.
Talking to these legends of the mountain has made me more aware than ever of how difficult this climb can be. The team moves on, and we're finally getting towards the end of the Shira Plateau. We're making progress in our mission to get to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. The vast change in landscape and vegetation means we're leaving behind the moorland and we're entering the alpine desert. But progress is getting much harder. Summiting the world's tallest freestanding mountain is neither quick nor easy, especially with a film crew tagging along and the mountain throwing some extremely foul weather down at us. We have just crossed 4,000 meters, which is pretty cool. Let's see, actually no, it's slightly higher than that, it's 4,010. Not many places higher than that. Mount Meru right next door, well, somewhere in the mist, is about 4,600. So by the time we get to Lava Tower, we'll be at that height. But the thing is, as much as this is an interesting achievement, we now just have another 2,000 to go. Go figure. Onwards then.
The higher we get, the greater our chances of suffering from altitude sickness. Earlier in our climb, I got to see a special item in our equipment that could mean the difference between life and death in an emergency.
One of the very real concerns and the very real risks of an expedition like this is altitude sickness. Crudely put, if you send too high, too quickly, your body just doesn't have any time to adapt to the fact that the oxygen levels become much, much thinner the higher you go. And at 5,900 meters, there's very little oxygen. The easiest and simplest way of dealing with altitude sickness is just really to get whoever's suffering from it down the mountain as fast as possible. But in case that isn't possible, that's where this then comes in. It's a gammo bag. Think of it really as a pressurized canister. I could tell you what it does, but it's a lot easier for me to just actually show you. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, I'm the victim here. I've got altitude sickness, and our guide here, Joel, needs to take emergency measures as soon as possible. Gets me into the bag, make sure it's all snug and tight, and then after that, he locks it up. Basically, it's a sealed chamber. What you're hearing now is oxygen being pumped, or rather air being pumped into the bag. And we therefore simulate bringing the victim down to, say, sea level. The rate at which this is continuing, they're actually going to bring me down to a level much, much lower than Moshi Town, where we started our climb. That's about 800 meters above sea level. And by the time this is done, we'll be much, much closer to zero. Once this is inflated and it's up to pressure, it's actually quite comfortable. The pressure does build up fairly rapidly. So in an emergency, this is extraordinarily handy. My one hope, however, is that we just don't have to use this in the duration of this entire climb, because that would really, really have to be an emergency. So, one demonstration done, and hopefully, this is the last time we see this.
Back on the trail, the cold and the rapidly changing weather makes for tough going. Before the use of tents and huts, climbers of Kilimanjaro used to spend the night in one of its many caves, which also happened to provide excellent shelter from the rain.
We are now out of the heathland moorlands. We are now effectively in the alpine desert. When you think of desert, obviously it's supposed to be hot and dry and dusty. Obviously not the case here. The crew decided to take a bit of a break from the rain and the mist and the cold. There's a lot of it up here. And of course, at the same time, when you do take a break out here, you have to refuel. Very important.
The saturating weather does not stop, and the team doesn't either. We have to make it to Lava Tower in good time if we are to get to our camp at the base of the treacherous western breach by nightfall. I have to push myself. The altitude and the conditions mean my head is down, and I barely notice the looming presence of Lava Tower in the mist ahead. The tower is a huge stack of cooled and hardened lava that dominates the landscape. It's a volcanic plug, effectively corking the vent that created it. It's a stunning setting for a breather, but suddenly, there's bad news from our guides about our plan to go up the western breach.
The camp is impossible.
It's impossible to go there.
Let me explain what's going on here. Tom, our producer, and of course Joel, one of our guides. Our original plan was to move from here, the Lava Tower camp, and then head up there to the Aru Glacier, and then finally use the Western Breach. It's the most challenging way up the mountain. But the weather's been particularly bad. It's raining. We've actually come in a bank of sleet to this particular camp. And Joel's telling us that simply isn't safe. He's recounting incidents in 2002 where a porter died. In fact, sometime in September, October, a tourist also died going up the exact same route. So, yeah, we'll have to change our plan.
We crack on and leave behind the imposing wall of rock and ice. Our new route to the Barranco camp actually now takes us downhill. And although it's now a race against time, the beauty of the valley we descend through isn't lost on us. It is a long and punishingly fast descent into camp. I am in agony. My back simply gave up and my head is swimming. I'm held to my tent with the worst fears going through my mind. This really could be the end of my journey. If nothing changes by morning, the team will have to continue up without me.
Atogo pevi baraka bunja. Sisi vijana. Atogo pevi baraka bunja. Jacksoni bunja. Bunja siogo pe bunja. Jacksoni bunja. Bunja siogo pe bunja. Sisi vijana. Atogo pevi baraka bunja. Sisi vijana. Atogo pevi baraka bunja. Katom bunja. Bunja siogo pe bunja. Katom bunja. Bunja siogo pe bunja. Sisi vijana. Atogo pevi baraka bunja. Andrew bunja.
Taking Isaac to Moriah. We'll sacrifice to the Lord.
Father, why do we sacrifice?
We sacrifice out of obedience. It's how we worship.
My God! Have mercy, O God!
Where is the lamb for the burnt offering?
The Lord will provide himself a lamb.
You said we need that document. You said so yourself.
What's wrong with you?
I can't find it. I can't find the inhaler. Philip, what are we going to do? He's going to die now. Hans, come on, help!
You can never be too careful.
I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do.
Do something!
What something?
I don't know anything. Do something. Can you do something?
If anything happens to my son, even a bruise, I will never forgive you. I will never forgive you.
But you went.
Unasema ya kwamba ni msichana alikuwa approach, si ndio?
Ndio.
Mimi nakaa msichana?
Ulinona mimi nikikuwekea mchele?
Wewe ndio iko mimi hapa. Hakuna mtu mwingine anakaa na mimi hapo.
Mimi ni party animal. Ndapataje swali ya daktari tunakutana wapi? Ama ulikuwa?
Kwa nimepanga kulainisha mambo.
Utajitetea ukiwa upande gani?
Wewe, nyamaza. Kaa kimya.
Pamsengaso.
Mimi si bouncing castle, unamaanisha nini kijana?
Si umesema kazi yako ni ya kupounce?
Mubaba. Mubaba.
Mpapa, mimi papa yako?
Mubaba, sina nakujanga hiyo club sana.
Ndio unakujanga lakini
si ni tipo pole. Sina kuongelesha pole.
We speak to a distinguished public health expert. She started off as a teacher, went back to university and graduated top of her class and took on a career path that has seen her work become the reference point on how healthcare at community level is managed. Our guest is the former Chancellor of Moi University, Professor Miriam Were.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much.
It's an extreme privilege and honor to host a true living legend. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much. It's my honor that you came to talk with me. Thank you.
And let's start off. Let's go back to your early life, your education in Kenya and in the United States.
I grew up in Western Kenya, just outside Kakamega town, in a place called Shinyalu, Lukala village. I grew up in a Christian village. In those days, Christians used to come together to form villages. And I grew up in a Christian village of the Friends Church. And I went to school. In those days, most of the schools were by religious groups because the colonial government didn't have schools in the villages. And I grew up in the 1940s, so the only schools there were the church schools. I went through that school until the French schools until I got to KAPE, Kenya African Preliminary Examination. In those days, again, I'm talking about the 50s now, when there was only one high school for girls, the Protestant girls, which was the Alliance Girls High School, and one high school which was for Catholics, which was Limuru. Now, all of us hoped if we went to high school, we go to Alliance. So we were all waiting to go to Alliance. But in 1956, which is when I started my Standard 8 exam, when the results came in 1957, we got a message after that, you can't go to Alliance. And we said, why? Because they said too many of us from Nyanza part, which is currently Nyanza Western, because too many of us had passed. And we could only have 3 places in Alliance. So they decided to establish a school in Western.
So you had such a high pass rate at that point in time?
Yes, in 1956.
Wow.
So they decided to establish a new high school in Western Kenya called Butere. We were all very miserable not to go to Alliance. But we got to Butere and it turned out to have been okay. Except that because it was a new high school, it didn't have any laboratories. It had been a girls' primary school, but it didn't have any laboratories. So we couldn't study chemistry or physics. We only studied biology. And I had been very interested in health issues because I used to see children with jiggers, children with wounds, children with malaria, and I had been very interested in health issues. But now that I didn't have science, I felt, okay, that closes the door. But there was an interesting event that happened often. The church used to organize youth meetings for young people. And there was a nurse from the mission, an American missionary nurse who always came with these groups and to treat any sick children that came to these youth gatherings. And she always asked, who is going to wash the dirty feet of the children so that I can put medicine on them? And I always volunteered because I had younger brothers and sisters, and so it was not abnormal to wash.
So it was always in you, extremely dedicated from a young age.
So
the will to help people.
Well, I was really interested. So I used to wash the feet of the children so that she could apply the medicine. And then I go home and that's it. I didn't realize that she was keeping note of this. And this happened every year, and I just washed the dirty feet of children, their wounds, then she would put medicine. When I came to Form 4 in Butere, this lady came and asked me if what I would like to do in life. I told her, well, I had wanted to work in the health sector, but I don't have science, so that is that. And after the results of Form 4 came out in Butere, after Butere, in 1957, we had the results from the Cambridge School Certificate. I had passed in Division 1, but of course the only science there was biology. And so my door to health seemed closed. And I actually got an invitation to come to the Royal Technical College, which became the University of Nairobi, to study literature, English, and history. And I said, fine. I didn't mind studying those. And while I was waiting for the university to open, the missionaries come to my village. And my father and my mother, we were there cleaning up the bins. And we see a car coming, and the cars were not common in those days. We see a car coming, and the missionaries coming, and I thought, well, it was something to do with my father, because my father was so active in church work. But after a cup of tea, they asked me, would you like to go to America to college? Out of the blue. Wow. So I tell them, no, I don't want to go to America. And they looked so puzzled, and my father looked so shocked. So my father asks me, why wouldn't you go to America? I said, it is too far. So my father then told the missionaries, let my daughter and I discuss this matter, and I'll come and give you an answer tomorrow. And so they said, no, we shall come back with the answer tomorrow ourselves. So my father asks me, why wouldn't you go to America? These people have come from America. It's not too far. Our people in the church always go to America for conferences, and they come back. How can it be too far? So I told him my fear. My fear was that my mother had died when I was in Form 2. And my fear was that if I went to America, which was very far, and my father died, I wouldn't even be at his funeral, and I would never get there to be at his funeral. It is too far. So my father said, but I can die now while you are sitting here. And I said to him, but if you die now, I'll be at your funeral. But if I'm in America, I won't be at your funeral. So he made up again with me. He told me, I'm going to pray to God that I will be alive when you come back in 4 years. Would you go? And I said, yes, because I had seen my father's word fulfilled all my life. The only thing that was not fulfilled was my mother's death. But whatever he prayed about was done. So I told him, yes, I can go. Early the next morning, the missionaries come back. Okay. And my father said to them, oh, she has agreed she can come. They said, no, we want her to tell us. So I told them, I have accepted to go to America. And then they say, why? Then I explained to him. And they said, you believe that? I said, yes, I believe that. God will respect his word with my father. Then they explained...
Even at such a young age?
Well,
you had strong faith, belief, conviction in God.
Yes, God has been real in my life, most of my life. I think from the time I was 10 years, I have had a personal active faith in God. Then the Americans explained to me that one of the reasons they wanted me, they had recommended me to go to the US is because it is possible in the US, even if you have not done science in the high school, you can actually get an opportunity to study it in what they call liberal arts college. And then this missionary had come with the nurse that used to organize the workshops, who used to see me washing feet. So they explained to me that they wanted me to have this chance so that I could bridge the gap of the lack of science and maybe go into the health profession if I wanted. So it became exciting now. I said, I'll be very happy to go. So to make a long story short, they helped me to organize my passport and so on. And I ended up in a college called William Penn College in Iowa. And I found that it was possible to take the first class in chemistry, which was the equivalent of A-level chemistry in Kenya or in the British system. And I remember in the first session, the teacher put H2O plus CO2 on the blackboard. And I had seen these things in high school. Right. But whenever we asked our teacher, what do they stand for? He says, you can't understand because it is all about chemistry and we are not doing chemistry. So when I saw this, I put up my hand, and I was the first African student in that college. I put up my hand and I said, why are you putting 2 after H and nothing after O? And CO2, you have not put anything on C, but 2 on on O. What do you decide where to put the O? Yeah. So the whole class stand. First of all, I was already a novelty because I was the African, the first African in the college.
What year was this?
This was 1961.
1961.
And this African doesn't know what H2O stands for. So the teacher says, let's discuss this after class. So we finish the class, and then the teacher comes to me afterwards, and he says, let me wait. So he went and checked on my grades. So he comes back and he says, oh, you got distinctions throughout your high school, but you didn't have any chemistry. So I explained. Then he said, okay. So to make a long story short, he gave me a list of chemistry books and physics books that I was to study. And if I had any problem, to ask him. And then I got that opportunity to study the sciences. And when I graduated...
What an amazing opportunity, straight from O levels.
Yes.
These missionaries come to your house,
yes,
offer you this amazing opportunity in life.
Yes, yes.
And straight, you're in the United States.
Yes.
It's like a dream come true.
Yes.
But obviously, you should have the will to learn as well, which you did.
Yes, I was very eager because, and fortunately for me, I found chemistry absolutely fascinating. And so on. And physics was a bit tough, but I also went through it. So when because I was not able to come home at the end of every year, I took summer courses. So I was able to graduate in 3 years rather than 4. And I graduated with a major in biology, chemistry, and physics. So I was a scientist after all. And I was even admitted to an American medical school called Indiana University Medical School. So I was saying, thank God. And then it turned out that there was no way to raise.
But you know what they say? God only helps those who helps themselves.
It was true. It is true.
That's exactly you.
Yes, well,
you worked really hard and you had the blessings of God with you.
Yes, I really believed God opening the doors. But the one door that God didn't open for me was the desire to come home before I could study medical school in the US, because I had been away now for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to come home to see my father, because you remember my father had again with God for 4 years. I wanted to see my father so that I could go back to study medicine.
But even your bond with your father, that was so touching what you said.
Well,
I don't want to go to the States. What if I go and in the meantime you pass away?
Yes, yes.
Just show the bond you had with your family.
Yes, yes. We had
the feelings,
strong bond,
the emotions, the strong bond.
Yes.
And then he finally convinced you, he said, I'll pray.
Well,
I'll be absolutely fine when you get back.
Yes.
And then you said, yes, your prayers will come true.
That's right.
And I'll go.
Yes. Yes.
Very, very touching, very touching.
And then you see, so everything was, so everything, I felt that I was in the, God was fulfilling my desire to serve him through health. And when the medical school turned up, there was an institution called African American Institute, which had just been established to help African countries prepare professionals. So at my graduation, by the way, I was in the top 3% in the USA. So I was listed in the 1964 who is who among American universities and colleges.
Top 3% in the whole of the United States,
yes,
in 1964?
Yes.
That's an absolute honor.
So because of this...
We're proud of you.
Well,
that's our Kenyan out there.
It was Kenya.
Within the top 3% in 1964.
Yeah, it was
when things were so difficult at that point in time.
It was God's doing. And especially since I didn't have the sciences before. So what happened is that, therefore, I was admitted to a medical school because, and then this African American Institute were very eager to sponsor me because I was a good student. And my church said they will look after the residential costs. And everything seemed okay, except that we couldn't find money to bring me home before the medical school. And I was too homesick. Mm-hmm. So I tried to go. I actually reported to the medical school in September 1964, but I just couldn't. That is one time where my determination failed me. Tears just kept on coming. I just couldn't. I would think about my father, and I just couldn't go on. So the doctor finally told me, "You better go. You'll break down here." one of the doctors who was teaching us recommended me to go and see the university doctor. And the university doctor said, you better go home. You are going to break down. And then you come back next year to study medical school in the USA. So I said, okay. So I came home. Unfortunately, by that time, Kenya was now independent.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And someone introduced me by telephone to the Kenya UN office. You know, God just brought people in my way. I didn't know. And so the ambassador of the Kenya office in the UN, Ambassador Burud Nawera, who happened to be a friend of my brother's.
Okay.
So he said, we have been hearing that you are in the US, but we had no contact with you. And what were you doing? I said, I was studying science. Where are you? I said, I have graduated. He says, so what are you doing here? You should be home. I said, yes, I would like to go home, but I don't have any transport, any ticket. He said, I'll contact Nairobi, and we shall try to give you a ticket to go home so that we can benefit from your science degree. So through that process, I got a ticket from Kenya to come back home.
Okay.
In early '65. And we went to the Ministry of Education, and I told them, I am qualified to go to medical school, and I would like to go to Makerere Medical School. And the PS, his name was Ketinja, I remember. He looks at my certificates and my grade. He says, well, you must be joking. We're looking for science teachers. We cannot send you to Makerere for medicine. We are going to send you to Makerere to train as a teacher, because they had just started a program, postgraduate education diploma for teaching high school. So he said, so you go there and you become a science teacher. So we cannot take you. So I said, okay. So when I consulted my father and my brother, they said, well, teaching science in high school is also good, because then you'll prepare those ones who will become doctors. So you're still involved, you're still contributing to medicine, but indirectly. I said, okay, what do I do? So I accepted. In 65, I got to Makerere to do diploma in education. I had always heard about Makerere, but I had never been there. So it was also fascinating to be in this famous Makerere. And now, as a postgraduate student...
Makerere was a renowned university at that point in time.
Yes, it was the only university in Kenya, in East Africa.
Well, that was the only university in East Africa at that point in time.
In East Africa, yeah, it's the only university.
It's produced some of the best professionals.
Yes. So when I went there and I said, hey, I'm in Makerere. So I enjoyed it. It was a one-year program. I enjoyed my one-year program. By this time, I had met my husband as a boyfriend. And while we were in America, while I was in Makerere, he was in the US, and he came to Kenya when I was finishing, and I got married in '66, when just after finishing my postgraduate education. And after I finished my postgraduate education, I was posted to high schools, and I enjoyed teaching science.
You enjoyed it, huh?
I enjoyed biology, and I enjoyed chemistry very much.
So at this point, you had no regrets?
No, I had no regrets.
In terms of that, you didn't continue in medicine?
Well,
but
you're
a teacher now.
I'm teaching.
And you're imparting your knowledge, information.
Yeah.
And of course, for the betterment of these children.
Amen.
So there was personal satisfaction there.
And it was very satisfying, because I felt that some of them will become medical doctors. Some of them will become nurses. So although I'm not going to be a doctor or a nurse myself, God is using me to prepare them.
But there was satisfaction just to see them do well.
Yes, it was satisfaction to see them do well. And when I went, I went to two girls' high schools, Lugulu Girls' High School and then Kaimosi Girls' High School. And there were very few girls taking sciences. And they were very fascinated that they had, for the first time, a woman science teacher. And so they got very encouraged. And so I began teaching science, and I enjoyed it, and I felt at that point I felt that God's way for me was to prepare the scientists who will become the doctors. When I got married, my husband was working in Nyandarua. He was based in a place called Olojorok. When we decided to get married, he was in Kiambu as the district agriculture officer. Then just before the wedding, he sends me a telegram to say, I have been moved to Oljororok. Where is Oljororok? I asked my big sister. So we found it was somewhere called Nyandarua. And we had never heard of Nyandarua because it was not a district before independence.
Okay.
But one of my sisters who was in politics, she said, oh, but that's where the Mau people have been settled. So anyway, we did get married in 1966, and I moved to Oljororok and taught at Thompson Falls High School. And for the first time, I was teaching a mixture of boys and girls. It was a co-educational secondary school, boarding secondary school, which was quite new and quite interesting. And I was well received by the missionaries who were running the school, and well received by both the boys and the girls. And I continued to enjoy teaching science. In the meantime, the girls that I had taught in 1966 had done very well in their O-levels. And one of them was going directly to become a registered nurse. So I began feeling that God was already using me to involve.
That must have made you feel good.
Yeah.
One of your students excelling to that level.
That's right. So I finished that 1967 in Oljororok, but then at the end of 1967, my husband was posted back to Kiambu. So now I had to be moved back to Kiambu or to somewhere in Nairobi. And that is when I came back to a high school in Nairobi in 1968, January. And I was shocked because it was in one of the slums. I don't know whether I should mention the name of the school, but it was in one of the slums. And I was shocked because it was a day school.
Right.
And it was an ex-Asian school. In the colonial days, we had the European schools, Asian schools, and African schools. This was an ex-Asian school. So the few Africans who were coming to this school were very poor from their slum areas, while the Asian students were being dropped by their parents, by their cars, and so on. And I was really shocked by the level of poor health of these students, the African students. They reminded me of the good old days, of the feet full of wounds, pus in their ears, just very sick children. And they never got beyond 30% in my chemistry exams. In fact, the Indian boys used to tease me, and they would say, Africans cannot do science. You can see they are failing. Africans cannot do science. And I would tell them, I'm a science teacher, and I'm an African.
And I'm the one who's teaching you.
Yeah. And they would get a bit surprised and say, because at first when I started teaching them, they were testing me to know if but fortunately I passed their tests. It was a bit of a long story. So anyway, I talked to the headmaster and said, these students are very poor and they are very sick. How can the school help them? And the headmaster said, I'm happy you are interested. Can you take responsibility for writing them a little note to go to the medical clinics when they go? So I said, wonderful, I did. And when they were very sick, I used to drive them to the clinics. But however sick they were being given aspirin. Only aspirin. Even when they had wounds, they had pus in their ears.
So that was the standard medication for everything?
Yeah,
aspirin.
Aspirin. But then I took there, one day I had two sick children. One was an Asian boy, and one was an African boy. And both of them had wounds on their legs. Then the medical doctor was a doctor, Mrs. Patel. She gave the Indian boy antibiotics, but the African boy aspirin. So I said, oh my God. So it is not just a matter of not having health facilities, there's also an element of discrimination.
And this was in 1966?
Yeah, it's 1968 now.
1968?
1968.
So after independence, this is all happening?
Yeah, after independence. Because there were very few. Then when I looked at to see how many African doctors there were, there was maybe one in the whole of Nairobi. And when I looked at the country, I found there were no medical doctors, really. So how was the African population being looked after? So I went home and I told my husband about this, and he said, well, let's hope God will do something about it. But I found that my desire for medicine began coming up very strongly. And I went and collected forms.
I think this situation inspired you even more to become a doctor.
It inspired me even more. I just felt I had to have a direct involvement because how does the African population become better health? So I went, by this time I was a mother. By 68 I was a mother already. Now, how do I look after these children?
How amazing was your mindset? Let's for a moment go back. That was 1968.
Yes. 1968. I just felt that, well, I have to make a contribution on the health.
Such amazing vision for a woman of that time.
Well, I just felt...
I must commend you.
We needed to have something in the... So when I took the forms from the University of Nairobi, and my husband and I laughed about them because we felt that there was no chance they could take a married woman into medical school because the University of Nairobi had only opened the medical school in 1967, the year before.
Okay.
So they were in 1968, they were going to take the second class. And in those days, married women were not being admitted to university anyway, and medical school was almost out of the question. But we decided, let's try. My husband was very encouraging, and he said, let's try. And to our great surprise, I got an admission letter. And then, surprisingly now I got into a crisis. I was going to be a student. I will not be getting a salary anymore. And what was I going to do about my car? And because by this time I had a car. And so I went to see the dean. I said, thank you very much, but can you give me a year off so that I join the first class, because I have a first degree. And he says, but your first degree was a general science degree. Tell me what you learned in biology. So I mentioned what I learned in biology. Tell me what you studied in chemistry. I mentioned. He said, you see, in medical school we do biochemistry. We don't do chemistry. It is biochemistry focused on the human being. In biology we do anatomy focused on a human body. Because you're not going to be working with dogs and pigs like you are doing for your first degree. So we can't give you an extra year, a year off. You have to go through the 5-year program. So I go back home and my husband and I agree that, okay, so be it. Then I began to get worried. But these are going to come out of high school, and here I am, a married woman. I will be so old, they might laugh at me. But when I got there, I found that some of them had been repeating classes so many times that I wasn't so much older than them. Anyway, I went to medical school for 5 years, from 1968 to 1973. And Nairobi University was one of the few schools which actually had a course in community health. And because of this, my interest in prevention, I immediately fell in love with that department. But knowledge has always been exciting to me, yes. So that is, then I qualified.
So this is where your path to public health started?
Well, that is how was I going to spend my life helping to prevent disease and promote health. And so when I saw that you could actually work with communities, through the medical school I was exposed to community health, and I could see that you could actually work with communities to promote their health and prevent disease. I was very fascinated. And so in 1974, when I was working with the government health system, that is why the dean remembered that I had been particularly interested in community health. Although I had graduated as the best all-round student, because I liked all the subjects. The human being, I found the human being a very fascinating, everything about human beings I find fascinating. So I had done well in all my classes, but I was particularly keen on community health.
So you established the Master of Public Health program?
Yes.
MPH in Kenya, right?
Yes, the first one in Kenya, in fact.
So now how did you go about this?
Well,
and how has the field grown in Kenya?
See, I had been teaching in the department since 1974. And by this time, the surgeons had a master's program. The physicians had a master's program. The psychiatrists had a master's program. only community public health. There was no public health. And the reason was because we were so understaffed. The university could not allow us to have a master program because we were teaching double. And so I said to myself, I must find a way to establish the department to be able to have a master's degree. So I talked with WHO, I talked with other international groups, and they told me that they could sponsor teachers for a year or two. And they did. They sponsored a doctor from the UK, they sponsored another doctor from Australia, and they came. And now we were able to, we could actually mount the Master of Public Health. So we did. In 1983, that's when I became the chair in 1982. So in 1983, we mounted the first Master of Public Health program in Kenya, because even the Ministry of Health needed them, not only the Department of Community Health. And we had
how has the field grown over the years? And
Pardon?
How has the field, this Master of Public Health program, how has it grown?
It has grown to the extent that the Department of Community Health actually has become the School of Public Health.
Wow.
So it is not only doing MPH, it is doing PhDs in nutrition, PhDs in any public health area. So it has grown very much. And the director, the first director of the School of Public Health was one of our first, was in the group of our first students of Master of Public Health. And so it has been very, 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 very interesting and satisfying to see that growth. So that
that's absolutely fantastic. Of how well it's done over the years, something that you started.
Yes. Well, it's wonderful
to have grown to this level.
It was wonderful to know that Kenya could now manage to produce its own public health specialists. And then, of course,
what is the future of this field? Are people keen? Are people keen to do this program?
Well, because not only other universities, it was so keen. The people were so keen that the University of Nairobi couldn't handle the demand.
Wow.
So more university has a Master of Public Health. Kenyatta University has a Master of Public Health. I think even Egerton, so that other universities have now got Master of Public Health. It is in great demand because it is the way that you can manage health programs.
Now, something quite important. What is the role of the public in achieving the goals set out by public health practitioners?
The public is...
Because the public role is very important, isn't it?
Yes. The public is absolutely crucial. And this is one of the reasons I have been so keen on community approach.
Yeah.
Because in the community approach, you don't only use the professional knowledge that you have, you also relate to the knowledge of the people, the interests of the people, and the requirements of the people. So it's a partnership. For instance, I would go to some area and I would tell them, I would say a child was kwashako, and I would say, how is this child? The child is not very well. And the mother would tell me, the child is not very well. And I say, what is the problem? She would say, oh, the child is being burned by the baby in my abdomen. Because I'm pregnant, that is burning the baby. So there's nothing I can do about it until I give birth, because this child is sick because of the pregnancy I am carrying. And I wouldn't tell her you are talking nonsense. Mm-hmm. I would tell her, well, I know other places where mothers are expectant and they hold their babies, but they don't get sick. She says, oh, what do they do? I say, they give them milk, and they give them eggs, and they give them beans. That's how they bypass the burning. And the mother does that, and the child is well. Then they know that, oh, so then I explain to them that the sickness afterwards, when the child is now well, then we go back and explain that the sickness is not because she's expectant, but it is because the child is not feeding properly.
So important how the message is conveyed.
Yes, very important. And then, once we understand that, but we also make sure that the whole issue of child spacing is very important. Because if you have children too close together, you will not be healthy, the children will not be healthy. But
you need family planning.
Yes, but you can't do this. Professionals, medical professionals, nurses and doctors and clinical professionals cannot do it because they are not interacting with every mother. But community health workers can do it. And that is why
such a crucial role to play.
This is why they are so crucial. And that is why Ethiopia has done so well, because it has a community health worker for every village. Not just, they don't call them volunteers, they pay them a salary. And you know, Ethiopia has been revolutionized just because of that.
Tell us a little more about your time in Ethiopia. 15 years was a long time.
Yes, you know, when I went in Ethiopia in 1985, Kenyans were known as capitalists, and Ethiopians had adopted the Marxist approach, the socialist. So I had to be very careful.
They didn't like capitalists very much at that point in time, the Ethiopians.
I had to be very careful with what I did and how I did it.
Right.
Because I would be told, we are not capitalists like Kenya. And I made sure that that didn't come up often. Mm-hmm. And but when I left here for Ethiopia, I was told there is no corruption in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is very good. I said, thank God for that. And then after I got to Ethiopia, and I worked on the idea of the child, because the children were dying from famine, and then the disease that came up from epidemics. I developed a program they called Accelerated Child Health Development, SCAD, because UNICEF was focusing only on immunization. Mm-hmm. But I could see children were also dying from diarrhea. They were also dying from malaria. So why just immunization? So I developed a program with the Ministry of Health called Accelerated Child Health Development, so that we could look after the mother as well as the child comprehensively. Mm-hmm. And we could use this program to strengthen the health facility. Because one of the problems that the Ethiopia government had with the UNICEF approach to immunization was that they said you can immunize even under the tree, just to mass immunization, so long as you cover the children. But the problem was that you can cover the children from immunization, but they die from diarrhea. So we used the approach to say accelerated child health development by strengthening the facilities as well as the communities. And the Ministry of Health in Ethiopia loved that idea. And the UNICEF accepted it. And so we began having money. The UNICEF executive director came to Ethiopia and said, wow, you managed to do wonders in less than 6 months. And he said, anything you need, I will give you. So I said, we need money, sir.
So the money came pouring in.
So money went to UNICEF headquarters, and then it was brought to Ethiopia. It was during the military period of Mengistu. Mm-hmm. And one day, after we had $1 million come to Ethiopia, a member of the military came to my office and said, we really appreciate the fact that you are getting money to Ethiopia. I said, thank you very much. I hope we can help the children of Ethiopia so that the families and communities can be well. He says, well, you know, it is not only children who are poor, we are also poor. We don't have much money ourselves. I said, sorry, sir, I hope things will get better for everybody. Mm-hmm. Then he says, well, I have a list here which you have just received, which you have just received, and I'd like you to sign it. So I look at the list, I say, but I don't know anything about this list. And he says, I developed it with your accountant. These are the kind of things that you have you receive in the office. I said, but I haven't received this thing, so I can't sign for it. He says, but it's only $200. Sign it, and let's get the representative the representative give this money to us so that we can have a little. Next time we can make it more, so you can also have some. I said, but I can't do it. And he says, but why can't you do it? The UN will not.
I can imagine your reaction at that point in time.
Yeah. The UN will not miss $200 or even $800 or even $1 million. After all, the UN has given us $100 million. Even $1 million the UN will. I told them, no, sir. The moment the money is given to Ethiopia, it is no longer UN money. It is now Ethiopia children's money. And I cannot betray the children of Ethiopia by signing something that I have not received. Then he became violent. And he targeted the pistol by his side. And he says, this is not Kenya, this is Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, people can disappear without trace. People can be dead, can be killed without any legal work. So don't you think that you're in Kenya. I said, but sir, I can't betray the children of Ethiopia. And he walked out, he said, don't think you're in Kenya, and he banged the door and left. So after this, whenever I had a bullet sound at the back of my head, I wondered if it was for me.
For you.
But I said, look, God, I'm in your hands. I cannot betray the children of Ethiopia, because if I sign the first $200, maybe the next...
We really need people like you. Can you imagine if there was somebody else who could have been compromised?
Yeah.
All the children of Ethiopia would have suffered immensely because the money would have been misused.
Yeah, very easy. And then, unfortunately, even the...
But you were extremely honorable.
Well, you know, the thing is, even auditors would
didn't get scared of anyone, didn't get scared of his pistol.
Yeah.
And told him on the face, this money is for the Ethiopian children, stay away.
I just said it is the children of Ethiopia money, it is no longer UN money. And in Kenya, before I went to Ethiopia, I had also faced the same problem with the University of Nairobi, where the bosses, when they saw there was a little balance in the project I was doing, the finance officer called me and said, thank God, you have saved some money for us. I asked him, saved some money for you? He said, yes. You see, the project has ended and we still have a balance. I told him, you know, this project is the national pilot project. And so I was very clear on following the expenditure line so that the Ministry of Health can accept it. If we are expensive, they will never accept it. And then the people of Kenya will be suffering. He said, no. And I said, no, but I cannot sign this because it will kill the project. It will kill community health. And you know, the finance officer at the time told me, you will not last in the university. I will make sure you get out because you're too proud and you can't listen to me.
Now, you've been honored not just in Kenya, but also by other nations.
Yes.
Tell us about the Hideo Noguchi Africa Prize given to you by the Japanese government. Then you had the Queen Elizabeth II Gold Medal for Public Health, the George G. Talbot Award of the National Council of International Health. All these international awards. And we're extremely proud that you as a Kenyan have received all these awards. We hold you with esteem and honor. That's why you definitely are our living legend.
Thank you very much. Before I realized, I was just so busy with my work that I didn't realize that people were looking at the impact it was having. And the first big award we received was in 1978 during my first project on community health. And it was by UNICEF. It was UNICEF More Respect Award. And so when I was told that, the Department of Community Health has won the UNICEF More Respect Award because of your project, I said, so our project is important. They said, yes, because you are giving a good example on how primary health care can be made alive. And it has $15,000 worth. But it's not $15,000 for you, but for the University of Nairobi. So the UNICEF rep gave it, we were all there at the reception, and they gave this to the Vice Chancellor, they checked to the Vice Chancellor, and the Vice Chancellor gave it to the department chair, Dr. John Bennett. And Dr. John Bennett said, this is going to the first computers of the department. And they bought the computers. So and then later on I learned that is the first time an African institution had won the More Respect Award. So I was very excited and I was very happy. And then others have come, other awards have come, and the one that surprised me the most was the Hideo Noguchi Africa Prize.
Yes.
Because I was told that there was a competition, a continental competition of nominations. Japan had set up a prize for the whole of Africa to nominate the person they felt should have the award. And so there were surgeons, there were many people, and these awards were two. Your either pure research where you do medical research or expansion of health services. And the part that I won was the one on expansion of health services through the community health approach. It was a very big prize because when we went to Japan...
What do you feel when you got that award?
I felt happy because, of course, I felt that my work is recognized. But even more importantly, I felt happy that community health work is recognized and that people might get...
It must be so special.
Yeah.
That award was invaluable. You can't put a price to it.
I tell you, it was...
And the person's satisfaction that all your work is being appreciated.
Yes. And this was in 2008. And it was wonderful because, even in Japan, when we went there, we were introduced to the emperor and the empress and all the high top level positions. So you feel happy. But I hope the focus on the community is never lost. Otherwise, I would feel like, whoa, what was it for? The focus on the community. And also, when I heard that the Queen Elizabeth II,
the gold medal
for public health, I had received it, I was very happy. That was in 2007. And the same 2007, the global community of young women, YWCA, Young Women Christian Association, also gave me an award for women leading in change.
You've had a string of awards. We can't even keep up with your awards.
Yes, but I think it was really wonderful in 2006 when President Kibaki gave me the Elder with the Burning Spear for when I had been the chairman of the National AIDS Control Council. Again, you see,
that's also extreme honor for you.
Yeah, when I became the chairman of the National AIDS Control Council, the prevalence was 16%. We were among the highest in the world. And I was saying, oh my God. But then on analyzing the situation, we found that a lot of the money was being used for urban-based workshops. The big people would call each other at workshops to discuss HIV/AIDS. When I became chair with my board, we said, this has to change. It has to go to the people.
Talking about pandemics, the COVID-19 pandemic, you're also a commissioner on the Lancet COVID-19 Commission, which is chaired by the famous economist Jeffrey Sachs. That's again a very honorable position.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Just give me an insight of what you think, or rather how have we been affected by COVID-19 as a nation, as a people?
Well, what we in the commission, what we have found is that the countries which have the community approach that we are talking about have done much better than the ones which have not. Countries like Ethiopia, countries like Rwanda, countries like Iraq. Iraq, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Iran, not Iraq. Have done countries like South Korea have done very well because they have the community approach. We have done reasonably well, but not very well because we don't have a complete community approach in place. Now, when Kenyans, for instance, on this commission, we are asked to comment on our countries, and it is very difficult because you'll say, when we did today's prevalence rate, it has gone down or it has gone up. But what is the population base? We don't know the population base. And you see, where the community approach is used, you can do it you can know the base because the people are known. The population numbers are known. So you can say, this is the base and this is what is happening. So you are going up or you are going down. So we have done reasonably well. And actually, nobody knows why Africa has done so well.
So do we get a true picture when we say the rate is, 4%, 3%, 2% on sample testing of 3,000 people or 5,000 people? But in a population of 15 million people, are we getting the true picture of the actual picture of COVID-19 when you give percentages?
As a public health professional, it is very difficult to get a true picture from that kind of approach unless you do sampling, unless you use the sampling process where you are actually sampling, stratified sampling, so that you know that the people I am testing, represent such and such a community. But we don't do that. We just find a group of people and we take them. So who are they representing? We don't know.
So we're not getting a true picture.
So it is very difficult for me to defend that position. So
I really admire you.
So I think
you know the conviction, the belief, the faith you have in God.
Yes.
And I think it's so important.
Yes.
I have the same faith and the same belief.
Okay.
And I know every time I reach out to him,
yes,
things will happen.
Yes,
doors will open.
Happen. Yes.
And that's why he opened all the doors for you.
Yes.
And through you, you know, so many people have been helped over the years.
Yes. Yes, I think so. And you know.
And this interview is actually a tribute to a person like you, who's given back to this community, who has done so much. And we as Kenyans are extremely and highly appreciative for what you have done.
Thank you.
I think the word thank you is not even good enough. I need to find a word in the dictionary to thank you, to say, I just don't have the words. What you have done. Professor,
thank you.
You're 1 in a billion. You're 1 in a billion.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm extremely emotional as I say this.
By God's help. By God's help. If we can, you know, we cannot stand alone. We must stand with each other. And we must move forward.
And I'm extremely honored I had this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you.
To reach out to you and make you speak from the heart.
Thank you.
I've managed to speak from the heart.
Thank you.
It was a beautiful conversation. A teacher, a doctor, an academic, and a believer in a holistic approach to public health. Her work for the last 55 years has defined how public health in the region is run. It's been an extreme pleasure speaking to living legend, Professor Miriam Were.
They left because Noe is an ungrateful scoundrel who has been stealing money from the company. That's why I kicked them out.
That Leonardo? He was very much in love with your mother. And that's exactly why I will never forgive that man.
But he's still going to investigate. He said he'd call me after a few days.
Oh, that's bad news.
And just so that both of you are aware, as long as I'm at Quantum, I'm untouchable, because I know compelling information that even Mr. Demian wouldn't want anybody to know.
Quit saying all that nonsense.
Isn't it weird? I found the necklace under this tree. What?
Lying heart.
The small and medium-sized enterprises are the heartbeats of the Kenyan economy. They contribute about 34% to the country's annual wealth, and they employ almost 80% of the country's total workforce. But this critical industry is at a crossroad.
That these MSMEs, are not even creditworthy in the eyes of the financial institutions. So you find when you're dead completely. And that's why the fund then would have been very handy to be able to cushion these institutions, so that, these businesses, so that they are able to stay afloat.
This week on Inside the Government, we talk to the chairperson of Micro and Small Enterprises Authority, James Moreu, on what the fund is doing to jumpstart this critical industry, right here on KBC Channel 1.
The mighty will fall.
Driver! The members of Contra Unit! How have these guys not even been suspended or banned from MLW yet? After what they did to Ace Romero? After what they did? Oh my God! Oh my God! Get some help out here! They just set that man on fire! Against the former champion! Oh no!
said we need that document. You said so yourself.
What's wrong with you?
I can't find it. I can't find the inhaler. Philip, what are we going to do? He's going to die now. Hans, come on, help!
You can never be too careful. I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do.
Do something!
What something?
I don't know anything. Do something, Philip. Do something!
If anything happens to my son, even a bruise, I will never forgive you. I will never forgive you.
But you went.
Taking Isaac to Moriah. We'll sacrifice to the Lord.
Father, why do we sacrifice?
We sacrifice out of obedience. It's how we worship.